Hello everyone and welcome to Activity Hub. So here we are with a new concept, that is, in today's video we're going to discuss about arrays, strings. Strings are nothing but character arrays. So what are arrays? Let's see. Array is a variable that can store a group of variable. It is nothing but a group of variable. And array can also be of different types: int, char, float. And remember one thing, int arrays can only store int type of variables. Char arrays can only store char type of variables, and float arrays can only store float type of variables. So how do you declare an array? You have to specify this. It is same as declaring an variable, but you have to use an additional square bracket where you have to specify the size of the array. So if you see in this example, int buff bracket 45 semicolon, and this 45 is there, right? It indicates that the buff array can store 45 variables, 45 integer type variables. So how do you initialize the arrays? Before initializing you can just do them like buff 7 5. But remember one thing, arrays start from 0. So to initialize or assign a value, you have to specify the size, but to assign the value to the first element in the size specified of the square bracket, the size should be for 0. What that means, to assign a value to the first element of the array, the size should be 0. And here if you see buff 7 equals 5, right? You specified the size is 7, but actually the 8th element of the array is getting initialized. The 8th variable of the array is getting initialized. So if you try to assign something like this, as we know buff array size is 45, if you try to assign buff size 75, because it would lead to some undefined behavior, because the last element of the array can be accessed by the number 44, but 45 is something else in the memory, so it can lead to undefined behavior. You cannot predict what happens. So let's go to our IDE code blocks, and there let's try creating some arrays. So let's include our standard IO header file and our main routine, and at the end returning 0. So let's create some functions. Some arrays like int array. Let's create the same one, int buff. So array 45. Let's create a lesser size, 10. That's it, over the declaration. And to initialize it, so if you see the fifth one, so before taking about assigning, you can also initialize the arrays. Like if you do equals and the square bracket, you can just keep on typing 10 values and they will be assigned to the first element. The value 1 will be assigned to the first element, the value 2 will be assigned to the second element, the value 3 will be assigned to the third element, and so on. But what if you don't type all the 10 elements array values? You need not to type all the 10 elements values of the elements, because if you initialize the first 5 elements, the remaining will be initialized to 0. So let me show you. So let's print out %d as it is an integer array. You have, while printing out, just like integer, but you have to specify the size. So let's say the 4. Why 4? Because to access the fifth element you have to type 4. Remember, arrays start from 0. And let's add a new line so that it's convenient for us to read. And printf %d new line and array. So we didn't initialize something like let's try printing the last element and see what it prints. So let's build it. And let's run this program. forgot to change the name of the program, sorry. It's still control flow.exe. 5 and ninth element, the 10th element or the last element is initialized to 0, right? While if you see the 5th element is initialized to 4. So what will happen if you try to print out the 10th element? Let's see. It's not going to give you a compiler error. It is 0, but it sometimes leads to undefined behavior, so it is bad. So it is not safe to use that 10th one, right? Even you can perform other kind of arrays like char arrays. Char arrays are nothing but strings, but they are a different kind of char arrays, which we will talk about in a minute. So let's initialize it to 4 and let's print out like x, y, z, r, and rather than printing out all of them, let's create a for loop. So it is while printing out the values of arrays. If you have small arrays like this, you can print out, but while printing out large arrays, you have to use for loop. That's a more convenient method. So %t new line and arrays index. So if you see, it will print out all those things. Sorry, %c, right? X, Y, Z, R. Similarly, you can also use float arrays. So we will now talk about the next kind of arrays, that a type of arrays, especially a type of character arrays, nothing but strings. So what are strings? Strings are a type of character arrays, but at the end of all the character, they will store a bunch of character along with an additional character called the null terminator. What is a null terminator? You will know about it in a second. So while dealing with strings, right, you should be careful because you need an additional element in the size for null terminator. So if you forget it, you might lose some characters. So what is null terminator? Null terminator is an equivalent to 0, which has an ASCII value equivalent to 0, and it marks the end of any string. So for example, if you use this printf and hello null terminator hi, the statement will print only hello, not this hi. Okay, so this is why null terminator is known as the string. It says that the string is ended here. The string's end is here, and hence you can't print. The printf statement will think, okay, this is the end, and hence you cannot print this anymore. The null terminator will be automatically assigned to the string if you initialize the characters inside the double quotes. For example, in this car buff array, hello, hi, if you initialize them separately like we did in that example, they will have only the characters. But if you initialize, or you can initialize the whole word like this, and with some double quotes in it, at the end the compiler will put an null terminator. And even one advantage is you don't have to specify the size. The compiler will automatically specify the size of this array. So let's try once. So let's make it some bigger size, like 15, and rather than initializing like this, let's initialize like hello I am. And to print the strings, right, you don't need a loop. That is one more advantage. You can just say like printf. For printing strings you need %s, and then you can just say arrays. No need to specify any index, anything. Hello I am. The null terminator is added at the end. So let's move to the next topic, that is string functions. Why do we use string functions? What are string functions? String functions are some basic functions that we need while working with strings. For example, you cannot assign a value directly to a string. You cannot do something like buff equals array in double quotes. No, you cannot do like that. The compiler will give you an error, and hence you need string copy function. And similarly, there are other functions like stir compare, stir cat, which nothing but concatenates the string, this compares the string, when you have stir length, etc. And to use all these string functions, right, you need to include string.h header file. So first let's look about stir copy. So what is stir copy? Stir copy functions copies a value of a string or a string or value of a string or a string itself into the desired string. Nothing but assigns the desired value to the desired string. So the syntax is something like that: stir copy buff comma array. The first, that is before the comma, there is an array, right, and to that array you have to specify that array will have the desired value of this array value. This array value will be copied to this buff string. So let's see it with an example. It's better, much better. So for example, I'll not initialize this, and let's clear this print statement. Let it be, but before that I will do something like this: stir copy arrays hello I am. So let's see if it is successful. Then, oh sorry, we did not include the string.header file h. String.h. Hello I am. You can even change this like I am JSON, something like that. I am JSON. That's it. Very straightforward, very simple, and pretty easy to use. So the next function is stir compare. The stir compare function is used when you want to compare two strings, when you want to compare whether the value of one string is greater than the value of second string, or lesser than or equal to the second string. But you cannot perform such kind of activities with an if statement. Hence you need stir compare. So the syntax is something like that: int x stir compare buff array, and see this. The stir compare returns a value to the x, returns a value, and that value will be stored in x. You will learn more about return how functions will return values in the next video, where we will do about functions, how to create your own functions. But for now, understand that stir compare returns a value, and that value will be stored in variable x. And if the returned value is 0, then that means both strings are equal. If the returned value is greater than 0, then this buff array is there, right? This buff array ASCII value. What are ASCII values? ASCII values are nothing but for every character um, it will have an integer value. For example, so I will print out something like this: %d, %d. Let's do something like 0. The 0's ASCII value in is not, I think 48. It will print out 48 now. I think so. Yeah, 48. And if you go for something like 2, that will be 50. This is two two characters ASCII value is 50. So like that, every character has an integer value. So this buff array's all ASCII value is greater than the second array's ASCII value. If it is lesser than 0, then the buff array's ASCII value is lesser than the second array's ASCII value. So let's try it out in Visual Studio Code. So okay, so let's do something like stir compare. Let's create a variable of x equals stir compare and arrays, and I am JSON. So if x is equal to 0, this is how you perform calculations. Printf both are equal. Let's copy this. If it is greater than 0, then string 1 has greater ASCII value. So let's do something like this. String 2 has greater value if x is lesser than 0, right? So let's build it, and now it will be 0. It would be like both are equal. Let's add a new line. So let's change this. Both are equal. Now let's make this smaller I. So smaller I has, I don't know what kind of value it has. String 2 has greater value. Why? Because this smaller I has greater ASCII value than this large I. So if you try something like I and make this capital I, then it would be something like string 1 has greater value. And you can even try out this, like making this bigger as and making this smaller as control build, and it would still return the same thing. String 1 has greater value. Like this, the string function helps you to know all these things. So let's know about the next function, that is string concatenate. The string cat function helps you to add a bunch of additional add a bunch of characters to the existing characters in the string. The syntax is something like this: strcat buff high. So as if you remember, the buff array has the value of array, and array, the high value is added to array, and hence it would be array high. And one thing you should be careful is, for example, if you have here, after adding high, you have seven characters with a null terminator. That means you total this array size is 8. The array can store 8 type of characters. But what if the buff size is lesser than 8? Then at that point of time it leads to again undefined behavior. So you should be careful with this. Even with str copy, you should be careful with the same thing. If the something like, if you will do something like this, the array to be copied occupies more space than the array size. Hence it would lead to some undefined behavior. So you should be careful this one thing. So that is why I prefer using pointers over arrays, because you can reallocate memory for them. So that is why using pointers is a better option. And about pointers we'll talk in the later part of the section of the course. So I am JSON. It has 11, size 11. So you can add 3 more characters, I guess, because you even have null terminator, right? Just a minute. Yes. So you can add 4 more characters. Strcat and buff. Sorry, not buff. What is the arrays, right? And let's add something like high. And let's print out this. I am JSON high. See, it added. And you can even do something like hell, and you cannot add more than that because you have just 4 characters. I am JSON hell. And what if you try to add, even I didn't try it, if we add more characters, I did not try it till now, it might lead to some undefined behavior. Okay, it can store it, but it is not a good option to use it. I would recommend not to do that, because you don't know at what point of time what will happen in your program. And str length, the final string function we are going to talk about today is the str length. Str length generally specifies the size of the string. So for example, in the buff array we did not specify the size, and every time you cannot count the number of characters you stored, and sometimes you might need that size. So how do you get that? By str length function. You will just have to do something like int x str length, and the x value will store the str length, the length of the string buff. The str length will return the value and it will store. So let's go to Visual Studio Code and try out this. X equals str length buff buff, not buff, it's arrays. And printf C, so percent D, X. The size of string is 12. You might get doubt that we have specified 15, then why is it giving 12? That means it's to 12 characters. If you see 1, 2, the space, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It will omit the null terminator. It will just omit the null terminator. So let's try, let me give you another examples to show you that it omits null terminator. Hell, you know that there are 4 characters in it. You can see along with null terminator there are 5, but what it will print is there are just 4 characters. So that brings us to an end of the class, and it is the challenge of today, this week, is you have to create, you have mainly 2 challenges. You can do them separately in 2 files, or you can do them in the same program. Firstly, you have to ask user to enter a string, and remember, to enter a string, as you know, you have to use %s. With scanf, you have to use %s, and you don't need to put that ampersand for strings. For example, let me show you once. To ask the value, scanf %s and arrays, and whatever you will enter will be printed. You don't need that ampersand symbol. Let me show you this. So I kill, and let me enter like something like this, GHH. So you don't need that ampersand symbol. So you just ask the user to enter a string through scanf function and print them in a reverse order. How do you do that? Just use a for loop and use the strlen function and go to the end of this. Get the strlen function and go to the end of the string, and from there keep on printing. And the second challenge is you have to ask, this is mainly best for arrays, you have to ask user how many inputs they want, the number of inputs they want, and then you have to print, you have to store all those, you have to create a base array of size that number of inputs, and you have to ask the user to input the number one by one, and then you have to store them in another array in bubble sort manner. What is bubble sort manner? Here, for example, if user entered 5, 7, 6, you have to store them in 5, 6, 7. So it should look something like this. For example, if you enter hi L I L H O, it should display the string in the reverse order from O to here, and if ask the user to enter these many. For example, if I enter I need 5, 7, 8, 5, 4, 6, see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That means it stored it in the bubble sort manner. So you have to use a couple of loops, couple of if statements, and you have to store them all in an arrays. It is pretty straightforward challenge. If you just need to think a bit, and that's it. You will get it. And thank you guys, it was a wonderful session with you. I too enjoyed a lot, and thank you for all your support. And bye. This is signing off, Team Activity Hub.